Okay, so look, I'm not a Pokemon professor, and you're not about to enter the wonderful world of Pokemon. Go on, get. What we are going to do today is to answer a question that I was bothering myself with recently, when I was obsessing over the franchise, as I am wont to do, which was, do trans people even exist in the Pokemon universe? If so, where are they at, so that I can appropriately stan the correct characters? And I thought, oh, wouldn't it be so helpful to have a YouTube video whose whole job is giving me those trans characters and telling me a little bit about the kind of representation that they give us? Wouldn't that be some just grand old swell stuff? Then I realised that I am a YouTube video maker, and that I could just make that video for other people. I could also make it part of my continuing series, where I go around various famous or not famous franchises, trying to figure out what, if any, trans people are in them at all, and also then try and work out if it's a good or a bad trans people, much like I did with The Simpsons semi-recently. Unfortunately, the first cool name idea I had for this video was scuppered by the fact that transvestigations is already taken by the worst possible kind of people, and I do not want to evoke that kind of message in what I'm exploring here. Rest in peace, a fantastic name for a series looking at trans people and, various media. You were dead on arrival. And before we jump into the trans world of Pokemon, I want to quickly answer the inevitable comments that will come up around, oh, I don't think there should be transness in this at all. I mean, it's a children's franchise, and we don't want the alphabet mafia propaganda to corrupt our children. And, look, okay, just shut up. Anyway, let's get out of bed and head downstairs to see Mum, or as it happened in Ruby/Sapphire/Emerald, get out of the back of a moving truck, which is totally illegal for a child to be in the back of a truck while it was moving without a seatbelt. Are there no safety laws or health violations by the moving company in that one, But, okay, focus. We're talking about trans stuff. We're just talking about the trans stuff, not the health violations of the moving companies in Pokemon World. That's for someone else to do. Now, when I title this bit as being about the general design of characters, what do I mean there, you might be asking? What is the thing about how a person looks, or dresses, or acts, or is connected through fashion and style choice to their gender? And, well, quite a lot, really. As these are the essential ways in which a lot of trans people, especially, will work to effectively headcanon or connect with a specific character, because they see an element of themselves within their aesthetic. It doesn't mean that Nintendo or Game Freak came into this explicitly wanting or thinking that such a thing would occur, but the beauty of a lot of art, especially art that has a vast fan base covering all kinds of people from all sorts of communities and walks of life, is that the audience has a big part in how a character is interpreted. A lot of people, myself included, can get very hung up on what is and what isn't true or canonically confirmed by the creators of a piece. But in reality, what you feel about it too is just as important and has about as much weight for your own interpretation as anything else. And in this field, you can find a lot of stuff from the Pokemon anime and the Pokemon games that really matches an aesthetic that is appealing to the trans and gender diverse community, that really clicks with either how we see ourselves or would like to be seen. And before I jump into my big example of this, I want to quickly address something that will come up from people who are trying to dismiss what I say here. Which is honestly weird, because if you don't believe anybody here is trans, then yeah, you kind of missed the point here. Because the argument isn't that they are definitively trans, it's that they could be identified with by trans people. And this thing I want to address is the argument of how I am coming into this with a Western consideration of gender, and that Japan is just different. Here is the facts, though. While there is certainly a history that is not completely in line with what has been experienced in places like the UK or the USA, there are many similarities between the communities and the issues that they've had to deal with, and that there are people in Japan who are transgender in a similar way that we would understand it, and that those people do pop up pretty blatantly sometimes in anime or manga or film or any other piece of media in Japan. There's this weird exceptionalism that I find amongst weebs when it comes to Japanese culture. This idea that it is somehow more pure and free of the cultural trappings or evolutions that have occurred in the rest of the globe, but you would be fucking wrong to think that. The same kind of progressive-ish shit is happening in a lot of places. It just has a different appearance and different context based on geography and culture. And the other side of this is that Pokemon is not designed specifically for a Japanese market. Nintendo is a global company that builds the games to appeal across the globe because of the money, so a lot of those influences make their way into the games and anime and into other things related to it. The argument that these people use about this is wrong on almost every possible count. And so, don't do it. Alright, now let's talk about the example that I want to explore when talking about these designs that are gender interesting. And I'm sure that you could list a ton of possible characters from all the other places that fit into this category, and make sure to do it in the comments to feed that engagement like I'm a starving chick in a nest. But for me personally, I will be focusing on the recent Scarlet and Violet games that are fresh and heavy in the memory banks of me and hopefully other people watching this video right now. So let's start us off with the characters from the game who might not leap to mind immediately, but definitely do represent a very strong visual narrative in who they are and how they appear. Gita, Kofu, Mela, Ortega, Tulip, Eri and Atticus are all some incredible vibes, varying aspects of strong choices that appeal across the entirety of the queer aesthetic community in what you might see yourself as, want to cosplay with for Pride Month or heading down to your local gay bar. Who frankly, if you are a gay bar, you should be running gay Pokemon events because what the fuck are you doing if you ain't doing that, you know? Gita screams professional and top dog energy. Tulip is a hashtag girl boss that I can totally see ContraPoints dressing up as sometime. And Kofu is a man who has never let society dictate shit about his facial hair choices, and good lord, it looks fire. Oh wait, no, fire is what Mela looks like, and I refuse to believe this isn't some mad as fuck young queer. Like the way that she walks, the attitude that she puts off, it's all there. Ortega is like the posh, bratty queer kid who is super eccentric and embraces that eccentricity that is a predominant theme of almost all the Team Star members, the very thing that makes them stand out and got them bullied at school before they banded together as a group and took on those same bullies, a tendency that you can see repeated in Eri, who is the big, tough, and beautiful fighting type member, and clearly has something going on between her and Carmen. As well as in Atticus, the Poison Team Star leader, who designed all the others' costumes to match their personalities, and to reflect who they are as different to the others at school that would wear just regular uniforms, like your bitch-ass character. Honestly, Team Star by themselves serves as a fascinating allegory for the queer community at the Academy, being people who came together because of their shared troubles and forged a bond by finding similarities not just in the issues that they faced, i.e. bullies, but also in the way that they were different to others and wanted to feel okay being different. Oh, and they also, broke the law and riots and shit. You know, it's basically the same community, just repeated. And the other characters I mentioned there are also very unique in their style because that's what it takes to stand out in the Pokemon universe. It's an important aspect of creating a brand full of characters that stick out to you and that are memorable enough to be the leaders of a gym and to be associated with the type that they are for that generation of Pokemon. You've got to be bright and bold and beautiful and big, because if you don't stick out, How are people going to notice you? And nothing in those statements I've just made so far is definitively trans or queer, like I said. These aren't essential parts of those identities that make or break them. Nothing we're talking about here is claiming that these characters are in fact transgender, or are in fact gender non-conforming, or are in fact gay or ace, or whatever identity you might pick. I'm not saying that, but I am saying that people can associate that with them, and they're not wrong to do so. And in fact, there are plenty of pieces of those characters that truly do align with those identities in a way that facilitates such an audience participation. A running gag in my friend groups is that nobody in Pokemon is straight or cis. And you know what? That could be true. They never confirmed that they were gay or trans or queer, but they also never deny it. Now, in direct contradiction of my statement that I am not claiming that these characters are in fact trans or gender non-conforming, I will now be talking about characters who clearly are, and to such a degree that if you can't see it, then you must not be seeing straight. Which is a pun. A bad one that doesn't make sense. Firstly, we have Iono. Now, is it the fact that she has the pastel trans colours in her hair? Well, as people I want to point out, colours don't necessarily mean anything, and oh, damn, you must have been fuming when the Sylveon stuff was happening, and is continuing to happen. Like, I'm sorry, but Sylveon's trans, that's just a fact, and the colours, it's all about the colours and the vibe, baby. But if that's what you believe, then fine. Fine, sure, fine. The colours are not enough for you, I get it. Well, is it the fact then that she's an over-the-top streamer who has a live stream called the Iona Zone and literally forces the player into making free content for her? Well, that's not a trans thing, right? Cis people stream all the time, from what I've heard. Is it the belly bolt then? Could be the belly bolt. Or maybe it's the fact that she refers to herself using the term boku in Japanese, which is a version of the I pronoun that indicates a boy or young man, and reminds me of the manga series Bokugirl, or Bokugaru, an ecchi romantic comedy about a feminine guy who gets turned into a girl by the Norse god Loki, and has to deal with the transformation, ultimately learning a lot about themselves and their sexuality, till the point that they like living as a woman. It is heavily transgender themed, and recognised as such by the media and its audiences and the creator, and it was incredibly popular amongst groups of all genders in Japan, reflecting a rise in gay themes in manga, as mentioned by Kono Manga ga Sugoi, IT Media, and book retailer Horindo Takadanobaba. Oh, it also came out in 2013, so what was that about Japan not having trans people again, you fucking Western weeb dinguses? But in all honesty, I would love to talk about that book at some point, along with a couple of other classic transgender manga and anime shows, because debunking that attitude from people who want to use another culture as a way of denying queerness is something that I think is really important. And we have gotten really off the beaten track of Pokemon by this point. Look, Iono gives off a lot of trans vibes, and has trans connections, and that's good enough for me. Now, our next person is another one who really sells a trans story, even if they are not trans. And that's the former leader of Team Star, Penny. Penny is almost a direct contrast to everyone I've mentioned so far. She does her best to be almost not seen, to be as low-key as physically possible, while still being a main character in the Pokemon series. That's because being shy is basically her major personality trait. She formed Team Star with the other members, though they never actually met her, because she was also heavily bullied and isolated for who she was, and so desired to try and improve their lives as the teaching staff, or the system as you might want to call it, did nothing to help her or help her friends. But the real trans element that people might connect with, well, apart from the whole literally everything I've just mentioned, is her connection to the Eevee line. being a trainer who literally just uses evolutions, as she sees in them the ability to evolve into whatever they want to, without any constraints or restrictions on the development or changing bodies/natures. Now, if that don't scream trans allegory, or isn't enough to convince you, her ace Pokemon is Sylveon. Sylveon. I rest my case. I've also not got much else to say about it. Our final characters from Paldea that I want to mention in passing before I move on to a different trans-esque topic or piece of Pokemon that trans people connect with is Rika and Grusha. Now, I don't bring these two up to suggest they are trans because they don't meet standards of masculinity or femininity in their appearance. Rika can just be a feminine man if they want, and that's perfectly fine. It doesn't mean they have to be trans. And Grusha can be honestly kinda hard to tell, like a lot of people in the Pokemon franchise, what specific gender they are, woman, and that has no real impact on their gender identity. Nor should it imply to people that such a thing means you are trans. Oh, also, I was fucking with you. I fucked with you. Rika is a girl, and Grusha is a boy. It's the other way round. I messed with you because I want to make a point about it not being apparent nor being a big deal. Because this falls more into the gender non-conforming category, which is something that basically everybody can do. Transgender men, transgender women, non-binary people, cis men, cis women. Anyone can tap into having whatever aesthetic they want, but such a thing is by virtue of itself part of almost gender abolishment theory. This concept that gender and its related linkage to cultural themes around how you act, dress, look, talk, and present emotions is bullshit and should be deconstructed. It's a big bit of modern queer theory, and sometimes queer theory doesn't have to just include queer people. In this way, Rika and Grusha can be a really great standard for that whole thing I mentioned earlier of being something that we can connect with these ideas. That we can see as reflective of Pokemon's commitment to characters who represent visual design for the fun of the design, not because it suits a particular stereotyped gender role. It's just a cool thing, and they also all look hot as hell to boot. And that's my spiel about Generation 9. And the characters who connect with some idea of transness or queerness or gender nonness. Now, I could keep doing this for every generation, and even the anime seasons, but frankly, I don't want to do it because it would take forever, and I also don't see the need to. I've covered my bases here, and you can now go and extrapolate that to whatever characters or specific region of the game that you connect with the most and want to consider in that way. Audience participation is advised and heavily encouraged with these ideas that I present in this video. And if you want to talk about characters that you find that match some of this in other generations or in the anime, go back to that comment section. Drop it in there. Feed me that engagement. Nom 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 nom. Okay, let's move on to the part of the anime that I want to talk about. The Jesse and James of it all. Oh, and Meowth is there as well, I guess. Not even the gay Meowth. That's the Meowth I stan. Fucking love that Meowth. And the Persian that goes with it. That's the best Meowth in Persian. I'm sorry to people who like OG Meowth in Persian, but that's a 10. That's a 10 across the board. I want to start us off by making it patently clear in this chapter specifically that I did not plan my hair being purple around the fact that I was going to discuss Team Rocket and its purple-esque haired duo. This is a complete coincidence and is not a bit. And me saying this also isn't a bit either. I planned getting a haircut weeks before this was even an idea I had in my head. I just don't want you to think that I would be this committed to doing a meme. I don't want to set up those kind of expectations or standards in what are ultimately very lazy video essays. With that said, prepare for queer and make it severe, to protect the gays from devastation, to unite all genders within our nation, to denounce the evils of cis and straight, to extend our reach to the interstate. Jesse, James, Team Rocket, queers off at the speed of light. Surrender now, or prepare to fight. Meowth, that's gay. Now see, that was a bit. And yeah, this squad is iconic. There are so many specific moments to consider when digging into the trans-adjacent identities that are Jesse and James that it could take hours to do it. Instead, I'm going to try and cram it all into like 10 minutes and see how that pans out. The big one obviously that leaps to mind, and that keeps consistently getting reposted every Pride month from these two, is their history of doing drag. James serves and that was a shit click, and slays in basically every single opportunity that he gets to perform, and Jesse will sometimes join in as well. And this isn't even a thing that he needs to do. Like, there's no requirement on James to disguise himself as a woman for whatever caper they're getting into. He could just as easily disguise himself as a dude, but he chooses that life.
To protect the world from boring fashion.
To dress all people with flash and passion.
To give all Pokemon pretty faces.
To extend our art to outer spaces.
Jesse.
James.
Salon Roquet. When it comes to chic, we know what's right.
Surrender your taste to prepare to fight.
And consistently picks it whenever the option is there. And this is where we continue that theme of queerness and its allegorical relation. Because sure, doing drag for heists or trickery or whatever isn't a trans or even a gay thing. But in the episodes that it happens, the coding of it is designed as such that it appeals to those communities and is something that we connect with. Queer coding is something that I've not mentioned in this video so far because I'm an idiot and forgot that it was called that until now. And while a more dishonest but ultimately smarter video essayist would go back and change their script to seem more intelligent and as if they were making the arguments perfectly, I've always maintained that these scripts are the barely filtered interpretations of media that I have, occasionally supported by real uni papers or articles or books or internet stuff that I've read. Even this bit here, the bit where I'm explaining how I write scripts to you, is in the script. All of this is scripted. It's just part of the authentic experience of the me being an idiot that I want to bring to you. But the queer coding is a big deal for Team Rocket especially, because it ties into a history of queer coding being used by villains or by the antagonists of a piece, because that was one of the few places that they were allowed to exist like that for the gay or trans or whomever writers that wanted to put a piece themselves into their artwork. It all links back to conservative and traditional clamps upon media, stuff like the Hays Code in the US, that limited the ability of creators to showcase the gay lifestyle by saying that it couldn't promote it, and that ultimately any queer characters had to be punished or shown to suffer for their choices. And so naturally, for many creators, the way to circumvent that was by having queer-coded people play the role that naturally ends up having that happen to them anyways. The villain.
Ooh, I quiver with fear. Why, if it isn't my big brother descending from on high to mingle with the commoners?
Without Batman, crime has no punchline. For it was the Batman who made me the happy soul I am today.
This goes back decades and decades, and can be seen in a whole variety of different shows and movies. And it affects Pokemon specifically, because a lot of the more blatant queer stuff is removed from the episodes during the translation and republication in Western media, as we will cover a little bit more later and in the next chapter. And so the people who make it through to the eyes of children in the English-speaking world are those characters that are slightly more subtle in their approach, and who end each episode getting blasted into the sky by a small electrical rat. There are more queer characters in the Pokemon anime and Pokemon games that we in the Western world never saw because they weren't villains, and so they just got wrote out. And this queer coding goes beyond just fashion and breaking gender, norms in dress. It also extends into how they're allowed to act, with James being a rather effeminate man, Jessie being a rather masculine energy woman. It having no bearing on the fears about what kind of lesson they're teaching kids, because kids are not meant to be learning things from them. It emasculates James and it effemulates, that's not a word, Jessie, because to do so is an okay thing to happen to villains. The problem here is that when I said that kids are not meant to associate with them or connect with them, is that a lot of these queer-coded villains end up being cool as fuck, and having amazing backstories and intricacies that cause them to be more interesting in a lot of cases than their protagonists, possibly because a queer writer was really invested in making them something that people liked. We learn so much more about the Pokemon world for adults through the episodes that focus on James and Jessie's backstory, specifically how they both ended up joining Team Rocket and finding each other only because they didn't fit in anywhere else, and often got pushed out or thrown away. James was being forced to marry a rich girl who abused him by his millionaire parents, and so ran away. Jessie's mother was a Team Rocket agent who vanished during a mission, and so she ended up in a poor foster home where she was forced to eat snow due to the lack of food. Scarcity, poverty, and difficulty are not often explored by other characters, but are explored by Team Rocket. Jessie also trained to become a Pokemon nurse one day, and I don't mean in the Nurse Joy sense, I mean in the literal Chansey/Blissey sense. Like she went to a school full of Chanseys, and nobody there stopped her until they failed her because she couldn't use the move Sing correctly. That whole backstory is part of a larger episode that focuses on Jessie re-meeting one of her classmates, a classmate who she was really good friends with, as Team Rocket breaks into that Blissey's Poke Center to steal food, and the Blissey ends up giving her the food anyways because, well, the Blissey knew her. Because they shared half of an amulet that the Blissey got for passing the university thing, or the schooling thing, and then Jessie failed because the school faculty let a human try it, and they were like, oh, sorry, you can only bandage well, you can't cure magically like Pokemon can. Guess you fail. God, it's just so sad. And I just love Team Rocket so much. They show us how hard life can be for people in the Pokemon world who don't fit into the prescribed status quo, who struggle to be who they are in relation to what they're expected to do, no matter how hard they try. Rich or poor, James and Jessie didn't fit in, and only managed to find happiness when they were in Team Rocket and allowed to do their own thing. Admittedly an illegal thing, but need I remind you that Stonewall was a riot after all? These characters are not confirmed queer, confirmed trans, confirmed gay. Confirmation is never given to us, much like the vibes I mentioned earlier with the Paldean people. But confirmation is meaningless when they speak in some way to the experience of a community that has adopted them as idols, and representatives regardless of their definitive standing as one of us. But ultimately, I know I promised more than just this. More than just me explaining characters who merely match an attitude or vibe that the queer and trans fans explicitly can connect to, or see themselves reflected in. I promised I would dig and dig until I found some actual goddamn 100% there and canon and undeniable trans people, and by Arceus I will do what I can in the next and final chapter before I have to conclude this rambling mess of a video essay. I really do hope you've enjoyed it so far. Oh wait, before we go, I just want to mention the beach episode. I might have used a picture from it, a very famous picture, as the eye-grabbing thumbnail for this video, and so I want to address the fact that no, that episode is not really providing much more than what I've already said. The very image of James with boobs is one that only really exists in the Japanese version of the cartoon. Because, of course the rest of the entire world would ban the shit out of it as James wears a set of inflatable boobs to sneak into the woman's beach beauty contest. Because, of course, James does that. Guy has just every excuse at this point to do shit like this. And, of course, Jesse and James beat Misty in the competition because, I don't know, James is hot as shit regardless of what gender he's embodying at that time and his theatrical stunts. It's not adding anything new to what we've already discussed, but it is another example on a long list of examples of James doing gender bender stuff. It being used as comedy in Japan, and then being censored the shit out of for English audiences. But that cross-dressing as well, being such a common theme or thing, is something worth remembering, because a lot of characters in the anime, at least in the Japanese version before we see it over here in the places that are apparently less okay with kids seeing, others engage in cross-dressing, Ash has done it a few times. Brock has done it a few times. It's just kind of a normalized thing for characters to get away with, for comedy and narrative purposes. Nothing queer there at all, except for, all of it. Anyways, consider that addressed, and let's finally move on to the canonical trans-ish stuff. Let's start with the one that nobody will probably say, but there will be at least one person who does think about it, and will get mad if I don't at least discuss it once, which is Nursery Age June from Black and White 2. A character that you can meet when you go onto the Ferris wheel for the repeat battling thing that you do on it. She has some unique dialogue, specifically in the Japanese version of the game, that discusses how she's actually a man who pretended to be a woman because the nursery was only hiring women and they were told that if they wanted the job, they had to be a woman. And you thought it was the left that was trying to force them guys, or Bud Light, or the fairy godparents, which is a callback to myself, because why wouldn't I want to intellectually jerk myself off in my videos? But no, it's the workplace that is force feminizing men, so that they can become nursery aides. June then continues to say that they have come so far already to get this job, and that if they quit now, then it would all have been for nothing. Sure. Whatever you say, June. This obviously isn't really a case of a trans character. It's a weird case of a repetitive theme in a lot of Japanese media that I've found, where a guy has to dress up as a girl or become a girl because of some strange reason or magical bullshit, and then they have to learn to deal with it and live with it, learning some lesson along the way, and also having hilarious hijinks for us to have a laugh at around gender. See that Boku girl thing from earlier in this very same video essay, or Ranma 1/2. But while this is merely just a case of some gender fuckery, the official academic term for it, that can still be used to relate the essence of twisting and messing with gender norms or gender ideas. The big thing that it illustrates is the difference between the English translation and the original Japanese text. A big, important distinction that will become a frequent theme anytime we talk about Japanese media featuring queer individuals. It truly is consistent that a lot of LGBTQ characters or narratives or statements get removed completely when they're developed for Western audiences. Which is partly why I think a lot of people end up developing this idea that they never existed in the first place. A lot of people keep having this weird exceptionalism, where they think that the West is the most progressive on every single issue in every single way or form or function, and that therefore all the other places must be further behind or worse off, which just isn't really reflected in reality. But taking notice of that distinct way in which the queer themes are more blatant in the Japanese version, we come to the most famous and well-known trans character in the Pokemon franchise, Beauty Nova, a side battle trainer in the Battle Maison, which is a facility that allows the trainer to fight for battle points in Pokemon X and Y. During her battle text in the English version of the game, she mentions that she completely remade her life, and was reborn as a beauty quite recently, a type of trainer class that is entirely women. And if she beats you, she talks about how if you want to make your dreams a reality, you must be completely dedicated. While if she loses to you, she mentions how she used to be a black belt only 6 months ago. A trainer class that is entirely buff masculine men. Now all of this might feel pretty on the nose. I mean, within the context of the games and the characters that we know, it can be seen to be very clearly showcasing a trans woman who transitioned and it's just kinda who they are. It isn't a big deal or a problem or anything, it's just how things be. But people might say that, well, it could be seen that she was just a female black belt, something that we've never seen in any of the games, and she had a big career change, and that was all. And to those people, desperately clinging to the raft of cis-straight media, like, damn, how desperately do you need every character in Pokemon to not be queer? But also, fine. When we look into the Japanese original text of the game, she mentions how, with the marvels of modern medical science, she was able to complete this transformation. At this point, if you don't get it, then you are being deliberately obstinate, and I have nothing to offer you except the metaphorical door out of this conversation. Beauty Nova is trans. She is a trans woman and our first trans character that is canonically confirmed in all of Pokemon. But she isn't the only one. Another, more recent entry is that of Blanche, the team leader for Team Mystic in Pokemon Go, and somebody who yes, admittedly, already looks pretty gender non-conforming just off the bat. But, like, this is Pokemon, they could be any gender at all looking like that. But the real confirmation comes in the way that the company and the bio for them has exclusively only used they-them pronouns when referring to Blanche. Something that the company has never done for another character in the franchise. They are a non-binary, or at least gender non-specific character, who is openly referred to by pronouns that break from the binary system that Pokemon normally sticks with, and yet again, this was not made a big deal of. It was just part of how they were introduced, and that was it. Making a big deal of queer representation does matter sometimes, because a lot of people are often very willing to ignore characters or deny them their queer identity because it isn't so clearly part of who they are. But it is also very important to have it become normalized, to have who they are just be part of them, and not have it become all they are. So, there you go. 5,000 words just to get to the end and say whoopie-doopie-dee, Beauty Nova and Team Leader Blanche are canonically transgender, so we got some representation. It's doing better than How I Met Your Mother or Simpsons so far, at least. Which isn't saying much. But my conclusion can't just be that a character is defined as trans, or mentions that they are trans, or uses they-them pronouns exclusively, and I just want to mention here how important it is that exclusively or preferred aspect of they-them pronouns, because they-them are not the non-binary pronouns. They're gender-neutral pronouns in the English language, and can be used to define someone whose gender you don't know, or to refer to cis or trans people who don't explicitly only want to be referred to by gendered pronouns. I mean, I would be okay with they-them, and I don't even know whether I'm non-binary or not. And I have cis friends who don't mind they-them either. It's all contextual and personalised, is what I'm trying to get at here. Yet, as I was saying before I got lost in the source, that's not what that means, we have not spent this whole video discussing all the characters who break gender norms and defy stereotypes and provide comfort and identity to trans people, to gender non-conforming people, to cis people who just don't connect with aspects of the gender that they are forced to live with. I don't want to come away and say that they all don't mean anything, because there are canon trans people or queer people, and that's who we should care about. As I have said repeatedly, the audience interpretation and the audience idolization is such a big part of any fandom, especially when it comes to communities within those fandoms who struggle to find representation within the media that they love. And so the characters that fall into that iconic status, I think, need to be respected for what they are too, and for what they bring to the table. They're all a part of queer history, as much as the official characters are, and if you find something to connect with in them, If you click something in who you are with their aesthetic, or the way they act, or their story, or their anything at all, then that is just as valid to you as whatever the creator or company tells you that you should be feeling that for. This is a 50-50 split experience. Art is always partly what is brought to the table by the person who made it, and partly what is taken away by the people who consume it. Team Rocket are queer icons, and their official status in the anime is never going to change that fact. So many Pokemon characters are queer cosplay choices and queer icons to the people who love them, and whether it is factual is irrelevant to that person. Head canon away. I'm not going to stop you, and you should never let anybody else stop you either. I think that's a good takeaway. Or at the very least, it's the best one that I've managed to get to by the end of this 40 minutes, so take it or leave it, you know? If you liked this video and want to encourage me to do more videos like it, then committing all the algorithm sins is the best way to do that. Comment, like, share and subscribe, because you're probably already in YouTube hell, and it can't get much worse than this. If you really, really like what I do, the best way to make sure I'm able to keep doing it is by subscribing to my Patreon. YouTube is a pretty rough place for someone who makes trans videos, and sponsors do not seem to be knocking on my door anytime soon. So for the foreseeable future, my sponsors are all the people who subscribe to that Patreon page. The names of those in the $5 and up category should be flying past the screen right now, and I cannot thank them enough for what they're helping me to do on this channel. I hope to bring many, many more months of explorations into the varied and wide world of transmedia to the internet, and the money on the Patreon lets me focus on doing just that. And that isn't a joke statement either. I already have all my videos planned for the next 5 months, on a little schedule I made to try and keep me on track, and not obsessing too much over any one thing. Other than all of that though, thank you for watching this video, and I hope you have a great day.